Hello, hello, hello. I am Bill Murphy Jr. This is understandably.com, understandably live. I have an interesting guest with me today, Grigory Lukin, who is a former financial analyst at Amazon. And we're going to talk about walking away from your job after COVID and early retirement. 35 years old, living the dream, or at least some people's dream of an early retirement. So thank you for being with us today, Grigory.
My pleasure.
I'm going to just give a quick intro and a little bit of background. So first off, if you've never been here before, understandably.com is a daily newsletter. You should go sign up there. You should check it out. Right now, we're live streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn, and I think Twitter as well. If I did this correctly, we'll find out. So you should be able to comment and respond and everything there. And I should be able to see it right here, but we're we're a little bit new on the layout of the launch of this. So if there are any technical issues, just holler at me, let me know. And just a note about the kind of interview that we're doing today, which is a little bit different. Usually, most of the interviews that I and a lot of people do, they're prompted by somebody is selling something, or they've got a press release, or they want to bring attention to something. So, recently we talked with a business school professor who'd written a very long, interesting article about Netflix, scholarly article. So we talked about that, and we did, the CEO of the company that makes the tiny little modular houses that Elon Musk claims to be living in, and and we've also done, some really interesting people that have books and things like that. Grigory's a little bit different. And this is what I think is kind of interesting. I had an idea to write a story about people that were walking away from jobs at big companies after COVID. And so I kind of reached out all over the place to find people like that. And Grigory and I actually talked a little bit earlier in the summer. But this is it's more of a behind the scenes type of thing, because I do these sort of interviews all the time. And sometimes I think, wow, that was a really good interview. It would have been kind of cool if there was an audience for it. So maybe it'll be a disaster. Maybe it'll be boring. I don't think so. But I think that's going to be part of the fun, where you can kind of see behind the scenes, like, what does it look like when Bill does this? So anyway, a bit of a long introduction, but I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork. And Grigory, again, thank you for being here. Can you tell us where you are right now? And we'll start with that and we'll kind of work backwards.
Well, right now I am in Canada, in the beautiful Quebec City, and just finished my move here a couple of weeks ago, and it is amazing, and I love it. Just go on Google and type in Quebec City and look at the pictures, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Got it. Yeah, beautiful city. A little bit cold, I guess. We'll talk about that. Maybe it's not going to be all that unusual to you, but so let's start with tell everybody. Where you're from originally, how you wound up in Amazon, when, and sort of what your career was like at Amazon.
Well, I am a Russian American Canadian, and then once I become fluent in French, I guess I'm going to be Russian American Canadian French. My family moved from Russia to the US when I was 16. We landed in Nevada, which is kind of funny, going from Siberia to Nevada. Then Nevada was a ground zero for the housing bubble, as you know, and so the economy completely collapsed. And the only place I could find a job with my degree in political science was at an Amazon warehouse in Reno, packing boxes and working 12 hours a day. That was a lot of fun. Packed a lot of boxes, got my permanent blue badge, so a full-time employee, and then transferred to Las Vegas, and then at Amazon, when you transfer warehouses, if it's a new launch, you get a bonus of 10,000 cash, and just to sweeten the deal. So it's a great incentive to travel. That's how I got my travel bug. So from Vegas, I transferred to Fort Worth, and then a year later to Tampa, and then a year later to headquarters in Seattle. Spent about 3.5 years there, and then I got an offer I couldn't refuse to move to Canada, which was always part of my strategic plan, moving someplace foreign, different, with universal healthcare, the usual. And I moved to Canada just a year before the pandemic began in early 2019. And the entire time in Seattle, I was a business analyst and investigator. In Canada, I was a financial analyst. And basically, when the pandemic began, I was already in Canada and on my way to becoming a permanent resident. Mm-hmm. And then once I achieved that in March 2021, so 6 months ago. I waited a couple more months and then left the company because my investments had grown to the point where I could actually afford a very bare bones so-called lean fire retirement.
Okay. So how old are you now, if you don't mind?
I just turned 35, so I technically retired at 34.
Okay, well, happy birthday. And
Thank you.
so if we go back 2009, I guess was 12 years ago, you're just out of college then, right? Or you just graduated, you said political science?
I graduated in May 2008 and then had about a year and a half of fun employment where I would, hustle, sell textbooks,
Yeah.
do freelance interpreting for the State Department, for Uzbek beekeepers, the usual. True story.
Oh, I believe it. And actually, I would love to hear more about the Uzbek beekeepers, but I'm going to try and keep us on track here. This is what I mean, man. These things meander; they get kind of fun. But I just want to make sure so I understand. So, you started there like working in a warehouse, that sort of thing, and somehow got into more of a, I don't know, use your brain as well as your body type of job. Can you? How did that develop?
Basically, when you were the bottom level grunt, the tier one or so-called at Amazon, basically you always try to move up and you always try to apply for higher positions. When I was interviewing, I had this whole panel of about 12 managers sitting in front of me, and I broke down an employee's day into 34,200 seconds, which is 9.5 hours. And I said that if we can save 34.2 seconds, we'll improve the productivity by 0.1%, and then just stack on top of that. Apparently, it impressed them well enough after they double checked my math that they put me as an analyst in their quality department, ICQA, inventory control, quality assurance. Then I taught myself Excel, which is the one trick of the business world. Everybody hates Excel. So if you force yourself to love it, then you are going to have no competition at all. And so basically got the job as a quality analyst, and then kept teaching myself more about Excel, SQL. It's not one of those learn to code things. It's just picking up things that nobody else wants to do. And then essentially leveled up as a quality analyst, and then a business analyst, an investigator, and then a financial analyst.
Okay, so it sounds like, actually, I hadn't thought of this before, but it sounds like some of your efficiency analysis here, you're kind of right square in the part of Amazon that people don't like, right? Especially the employees. I don't know how to shave 32 seconds off your day is that's pretty granular.
Well,
yeah.
You always have to find something that nobody else wants to do if you really want job security. For example, the most secure job in the world is being a dishwasher at a restaurant because, nobody grows up wanting to be a dishwasher. And there's actually an excellent book about that, about a guy who washed dishes in all 50 states. And he claimed he could move to a new city and find a job basically the same night. So it's kind of the same thing in the business world. If you just find something nobody else wants, like Excel, then it's a lot easier to get a foot in.
Got it. So you actually, we were talking beforehand, and we sort of, a funny thing is that I originally interviewed you and reached out. It was for this specific thing of like, I worked at Google, or I worked at Amazon, or I worked at, one of those comparable companies, and I left because they wanted me to come back in the office. And it's not until we're negotiating, kind of scheduling this interview, and you mentioned like, oh, I'm lean fire, so I have all the time in the world, or however you put it. And I thought, oh, that's another interesting thing to talk about here. But so go backwards for me. You mentioned before we came out, it was like you kind of have Tim Ferriss to thank for this. But tell me what the strategy was, how aggressively you're saving, how much money you're putting away, and maybe we can, just be really very blunt. Like, how much money were you making at Amazon? Like, break this down for me. How much money are you putting away over the last 12 years, and what are you doing with it to put yourself in a position now?
Yeah. So as some of your viewers probably already know, there's this groundbreaking book called 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I think it came out about 15 years ago or so. So a lot of the concepts in this book are kind of outdated by now, especially the dropshipping business. But there's this one great concept called the geographic arbitrage, where essentially you get to enjoy the same standard of living by moving to a different place where you can enjoy the same or similar things, but for a lot less. It's why, for example, a whole bunch of retired folks love living in Thailand, Thailand because allegedly dirt cheap, or used to be. And so that planted the idea in my mind, Inception style. And working at Amazon, climbing up from the very bottom level as a warehouse temp,
Yeah,
where
what did you make as a warehouse temp way back when? I know it was
so back
2009,
then, so in Nevada, there is no state income tax, which is kind of cool. And I believe I was making like 11.50 an hour, something like that. And then, so I was never making bank, although there was always, or almost always, a possibility for overtime.
Mhm.
And climbing up the corporate ladder and moving to Seattle, essentially, large companies like Amazon do not necessarily like to promote from within, and so it's the paradigm is always that it's shinier to hire an external hire, somebody
Yeah.
with a shiny MBA or such, because people who are on the inside, like, why haven't they left to work somewhere else? What's wrong with them? No ambition, so lazy. And so in another world where I went straight to get an MBA, I probably would have retired years earlier, but I played it on a hard difficulty level, and I would say that I would save about between 40 and 60% of my paycheck after taxes. And it would depend. For example, in Seattle, the cost of living was so high. I really didn't want to pay more than 30% of my take home for rent, because that's a dividing line. If you pay more than 30%, it's kind of no bueno. And so basically, rent in Seattle was so crazy that the actual cheapest and most rational solution was to buy a condo. And I, took all the money I squirreled away, and it was just enough for a 20% down payment on the cheapest condo in Seattle. At the time, it was about $176K. And it is now a rental that is not making me a lot of money, but nonetheless. And so essentially, my key philosophy was just a three-part thing. It's earn more, spend less, and invest the rest.
Yeah.
And I invested a bunch of it into my condo. And then I, at Amazon, even if you're a low-level grunt, you get a little bit of company stock every single year, or you used to, until the stock went completely bananas. And so I only sold my Amazon stock stash twice, once in 2016 to buy my condo, and once in 2020 to basically go all in on a stock market when Amazon stayed high and everything else went low. Because at the time I worked as a financial analyst, and I'm kind of a fanboy of Warren Buffett, against whom I'm going today, I guess, and Benjamin Graham. And so, basically it was an ideal buying opportunity, and it was one of those really rare situations in life where everything lines up just perfectly.
Let me ask you actually, I'll make a point first off. You talk about Amazon not traditionally promoting through the ranks, which I think is true. I've heard that elsewhere, but it's just an interesting point that it's the exact opposite of Walmart, which, big competitor. I mean, the CEO of Walmart started as, if not an intern, like unloading trucks and stuff like that way, way, way back when. Clearly that couldn't have been the case at Amazon because the company didn't exist at the time. But yeah, no, it's always struck me, coming soon to an article on Inc.com near you, most likely, since I write about that kind of thing there. But the second thing to ask you is just bluntly, rather than going through your whole salary history, when you walked away in Amazon this year, what were you making?
So when I moved from Seattle to Toronto, I took a 48% pay cut, and that hurt a lot.
In effective dollars, or actually just flat out, you're now making 48% less than you made?
Like actual US dollars, like apples to apples. It was a 48% pay cut. The craziest thing is that my standard of living didn't change much, because Toronto is the most expensive city in Canada, but actually, like, a lot of things were cheaper than the US. Like, for example, Tim Hortons donuts, which are amazing and delicious. They're only 99 cents. As far as I know, at Starbucks in the US, you can't find a pastry for like less than $3.50, and it's going to be like a dry crumpet. It's disgusting. And so basically, my standard of living didn't change much, but it was a 48% pay cut, which hurt. But it was all part of my 5-year plan, which I from Russia, 5-year plans, and to basically become permanent resident, because when you move, you are essentially on a work permit, so you're a hostage to your company. If they fire you, you have to go back. So basically, I had to suck it up for a couple of years and get my permanent residency, and then after that, I was free of Amazon, and basically it was so long, which they forced by trying to push me back into the office. Without that, we still could have had a few more months together, but it wasn't meant to be. And so at its highest in Seattle, with the salary and the stock options, my best year ever was about 95K USD. And usually it would be about 80K, which, from what I understand, is well below the median for those FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. And and here in Canada, it was when I got promoted here, I was still making 33% less than I was making in Seattle on a baseline year. And so, this isn't one of those stories where the main character, saves a couple of pennies and then gets a giant retirement from, benevolent grandfather or something like that. And it's not one of those stories where it's like, oh, look at this, fancy rich guy who made $250,000 a year at Netflix, wherever. But no, basically just worked my way up and then saved my pennies. And
so 95K at your max in Seattle.
Yep.
And then you said a 48% drop. So like you're the financial analyst, but we're, like 47, 48, like under $50,000 USD in 2020 was your income from Amazon, right? Is that what you're telling me?
Pretty much.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting on a bunch of levels. It's interesting on, so on the one hand, I suspect a lot of people would hear this and say like, whoa, man, I've done better than that. And I'm not on track to retire in 5 years. And we're going to talk about what retirement means to you and what might be different from other people. So that's on the one hand, but the other hand, there's not as much opportunity cost, right? This would be harder if you were making 400 grand at Amazon, and there would be much more of the temptation to say, well, stick it out for 2 more years. I can go back to the office a bit. Imagine how many more Tim Hortons donuts I can buy if I've got another $1 million set aside from working a few more years. So is that right? I mean, there's not as much opportunity cost to leaving.
Oh, Bill, 2 clarifications. So one is 50K was my salary in Canada, and I was cashing in the last stock options that I had received back in Seattle, because at Amazon and in other companies, I imagine, basically they don't give it to you right away. They spread it out across 3 years. And so essentially, even if you become the least popular person in the company, as long as you maintain your job, that vested plan that you got 2.5 years ago, is still going to keep vesting. But so my last good company stock vest was in November 2020, and after that there was no incentive left because Canada is too stingy for stock options. But the other thing is what you mentioned, it's the opportunity cost. And so technically, if I had remained in a workforce or a rat race, as I like to call it, then I would have been able to become a multi-millionaire, for example, in about another 5 years, 10 years. But then where does it end? Because it essentially becomes this never-ending race. Because then logically, the only thing to do is work until you're essentially 78 years and 364 days old. What's the median life expectancy now for guys? Like 79-ish. And then, you just throw one big party on your last day and that's it. But essentially what I did was I figured that I could work another 5 years and I could increase my standard of living in retirement, but I would never get those 5 years of more or less optimal health back. And so essentially it becomes this payoff. So it's kind of, like a prisoner's dilemma with your future self. Do I retire now and live essentially a grad student, lean fire lifestyle? Or do I, basically suck it up for another 5 to 10 years, have a way better lifestyle, but then some of the best years of my life that I could have been enjoying are behind me, and time is one thing you can never get back. So it's this kind of a complicated equation that is different for every person, and it all depends on your personal priorities and your personal wants versus needs.
Yeah. So interesting. So let's talk about what your lifestyle was like during. Well, actually, let's start with an elephant in the room. No, not married, no kids, right? There's nobody else in the world that you're currently providing for, right?
Well, ever since moving to Quebec, I got an aquarium with 3 little guppies, and there they are. And so, yes, I do have 3 fish that are relying on me as their sole caretaker. But yes, they're a lot of fun. But essentially, in a way, the whole plan to retire early is more difficult, but not impossible if you have kids. But on the other hand, if you have a significant other and they're not a flight risk, like if you work as a team, then basically, in a way, the journey becomes easier, especially if you do the DINK option, DINK, dual income, no kids.
Yeah.
But then even if you do dual income and kids, then still, you pull your money together, work as a team, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, basically for me personally, yeah, more of a solitary type, and so just been living my life on easiest difficulty level, as essentially like a bachelor with just going to meetups and having short-term relationships and such. But yeah.
And okay, so when we talked earlier, you were just we talked at the beginning of the summer. Actually, let me interrupt and correct myself and just say. If anyone has suggestions on questions, things you'd like me to ask Grigori, things about this whole thing, I think if you ask the questions on LinkedIn or YouTube, they will pop right into this amazing setup I have here, and I'll be able to see them. I'm pretty impressed with myself. Yeah, so you had told me about, let's start with what you did during the pandemic. Like, you were in Toronto, had a girlfriend at the time, but you guys kind of took off to the countryside, and you can talk a little bit about that. And then we also talked about your revenge trip that you were talking about doing. And it occurred to me afterward, I'm not sure why it's called a revenge trip. I don't know who you were getting revenge on, but let's start with the during the pandemic. What was your lifestyle? Where'd you go? What did you do?
Yeah, so at the time I was dating, and my girlfriend had a pretty bad immune system, and she also lived in one of those like housing situations in Toronto where it's about, I don't know, like 7 people living together in the same house. I think Fight Club, but slightly more civilized. But essentially like a whole bunch of hippies crawling everywhere and disregarding every single public health measure. And so essentially she had to leave town fast. I know, a lot of fun. Yeah. Especially for immunocompromised people. And so basically that was just when everything was falling apart in mid-March 2020. And yeah, basically we hopped into my car. I took my laptop with extra chargers, and we spent 72 days in Airbnbs all over rural Ontario and Quebec. And so there was a Deep River, Ontario, a small town. Then there was a month in Mont-Tremblant, an abandoned ski resort in Quebec, where like families of deer would just walk across the street. It was amazing. And then 4 weeks in Niagara Falls, when it was a complete ghost town on the Canadian side. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so a bit of this, a bit of that. And that really helped cement that, hey, working from home is possible and it's relatively easy. And yeah, it was a fun little adventure. And especially a pro tip, if you go on Airbnb, if you play with your filters and find a place that gets you a discount for an entire month-long stay, I believe they require 4 weeks, you can get some crazy, amazing discounts, like a pretty big condo in Niagara Falls for, I don't know, $1,000 Canadian. And so, yeah, so that was fun. And then afterwards, the revenge trip. Are you familiar with the concept of a revenge? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to just interrupt. So this was, you said 72 days, roughly from when to when?
From the middle of March 2020. That was right when the border got closed, up until late or early May of 2020. Yeah. So okay. From middle of March to like late May. Yeah.
Where were you? Because my understanding is, maybe I got this wrong, you basically left Amazon this year, right? Earlier this year. So you must have had another 6 months or so at Amazon after your Mont-Tremblant Airbnb Niagara Falls adventure. So where were you then?
Oh, so there was a whole year in between the Airbnb adventure and me leaving Amazon. So May 2020 through May 2021. I know I should put together like a timeline, like in one of those time travel movies.
Yeah.
And yeah.
In the future, we'll put a map up here, and we'll have like a little tiny, squiggle line following your trip. But so you're back in the Toronto area at that point then?
Yeah, I was back in Toronto, and I was renting a pretty large room in the suburbs from a really nice Vietnamese family until they finally snapped from the lockdown stress and started hosting dinner parties for Christmas for 10 days in a row. And that was a little bit too risky. So I went ahead and got a sublet deal for and for a small studio in Toronto, which was pricier and not as many creature comforts, but it
Yeah.
was as safe as I could get from COVID until I got my Pfizer shots, for which I took a giant road trip to Ohio twice in April of this year. But that's a different story.
Okay. Yeah. So you came down here to get the shots. It's kind of interesting because we have people that don't want them down here, and I know we have people from other countries that are like doing anything they can to get here to get them. Maybe more so earlier, but yeah. Okay. So what happens then? Amazon says come back, and you say
Oh,
niet. That's the extent of my Russian. Sorry.
not bad, not bad. Accent needs a little work, but not bad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So yeah, so basically I worked from home for 14 months to improve Amazon's bottom line and increase the shareholder stock value and all that. I did some of my best work. I launched a couple of international expansions. There's a well-loved American subsidiary that is now launched in Canada because of me. I'm not sure if they went public with the news yet, so I can't tell you what it is, but so basically, a lot of good work. I got promoted in recognition for all of my efforts and all of that. And so there's a bit of hypocrisy in whole white collar world, where on the one hand they say that, hey, we all adapted and we all did some of our best work over this past year and change. But on the other hand, they say, but yeah, let's all go back, which doesn't quite square, because if your employees did some of their best work working from home, then by bringing them back into the office, doesn't that mean that you want to lower your output? And essentially, there was no logical reason for me to be essentially with boots on the ground in a warehouse I was assigned to, unless there were some secrets that they weren't comfortable sharing over the internet connection, or there was some secret handshake and some such, which neither was also cool. And so essentially it was just an ego boost initiative to send analysts back into the warehouse, which had no logical purpose behind it. And despite my being very explicit that I don't really want to go back because my apartment building has fewer COVID cases than your warehouse, they just did not take no for an answer. And at one point, it got really creepy. Sort of like, hey, so let's start working on a plan to ease you in just 1 day per week. They did not provide any data on how they thought COVID was like the least contagious on, say, Wednesdays or Tuesdays.
Yeah.
So basically, it's kind of like being like a little bit pregnant. It's just science doesn't work that way. And so essentially, they would not take no for an answer. And then I sent them a goodbye email and a 2-week notice. And then in the middle of May of 2021, after 11 years and 5 months, I finally parted ways.
Got it. And I want to talk briefly about the trip, but kind of an interesting thing that hits me here is you're a young guy, right? You're 35. I'm older than that, 35. When I was 35, I thought like, wow, man, we're already here. But no, there's like so much more coming afterward for God willing, but for most of us, right? But there have been times I said I've had a lot of jobs, so I've not walked away in a bad circumstance, but I've walked away from jobs. I've said, this career isn't for me. Let me go do something else. I've taken steps forward and backward, but I've never thought of like, oh, no, I'm retired. I've always thought of it as a break. And it's a funny word, right? I mean, to be honest, I don't really like the word retire. I just don't like it. I'm much more like no longer having to work. That's a good word, or working only because I want to. That's a nice phrase. But retire is so, I don't know, man. It makes me think of like St. Petersburg, Florida or something, They used to call it God's waiting room. So
a gentleman of leisure.
Our readers and viewers in Florida. But so that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around here. Like we had a comment here saying, talk with him in another 10 years. And to be honest, that's like at the core of what I want. Are you going to be happy living in in the equivalent of a $500 a month apartment in Quebec City? We talked beforehand about like, what's your budget like now? Well, you're making on $1,000 a month American. I mean, where does this go, man? What does 50-year-old Grigori think of the path that 35-year-old Grigori's got him on here?
Oh, there's this really cool psychological fallacy called I believe it's called the end of the future fallacy or something like that. But it essentially goes that at any given point we think that, oh, we're so mature, we're not going to change in the future, and so we make lifelong decisions, which without realizing that our future self is the end of time fallacy and the future man by Fukuhama or something like that. So essentially the idea is that we expect that our future self is going to stay the same and not changing. So I'm well aware that in the future my priorities and everything is going to change. For now, it's been 4 months. I'm still catching up on sleep. It's amazing. And so essentially, I have interesting plans. Over the next 2 years, I'm going to be working toward becoming a Canadian citizen. Their immigration system is incredibly streamlined. You spend 1 year here, you're eligible for permanent residency. It took me a year to get all the paperwork together because they got overwhelmed with COVID, and then 2 more years in the country, and then you become a citizen, and then it's just completely for reals this permanent, and then you can get a fancy Canadian passport and just fly around, do whatever you want. So in about 2 years, I'm going to become a snowbird, and so that means I'm from Siberia. I can handle the cold. I don't like the cold.
Yeah.
I never want to see another snowflake in my life beyond these next 2 winters. So the plan is, in 2 years, I'll become a Canadian citizen. Everything is secure. And then spend 6 months in Quebec during the warmer part of the year. And, just hang out with all my local social groups and organizations and such. And then spend 6 months traveling the world. There are a lot of dirt cheap, fun, safe, tropical places. Like, some destinations in Mexico or Costa Rica, which is paradise, or Czech Republic. Thailand is getting more expensive, as I mentioned, but it's still pretty awesome. I keep hearing great things about Vietnam, even though Duolingo as a module for Vietnamese is really bad, so I had to abandon that idea. I'm sure Mongolia is pretty nice in June. And, there's just so many places to visit in the world, Argentina, you name it. And, so at some point in the next 2.5 years, I'm going to become a globetrotter and just explore all of that. And I have some ideas for volunteering. And once I finally catch up on sleep and all of those lists of things to read, to watch, to play, because I essentially gave up my life for 11.5 years, I still haven't played Nintendo Wii. I know it's sad. And so once I get all of that out of my system, I have some ideas for a sci-fi book, maybe start a personal finance blog and stuff like that. But the important thing is that, and if I get an offer I can't refuse, maybe I will rejoin the rat race for, I don't know, a modest 6-figure salary, but only if it's something that I'm genuinely passionate about. I'm not planning on that. And so, right now I'm not a millionaire. My net worth is closer to $1 million than it is to zero. But right now I'm still fine-tuning my budget. Right now I can live quite happily with all of my existing toys, my camera, my computer, my guppies, everything else on $1,000 per month.
Yeah.
And so the important thing is that a whole lot of options and a whole lot of venues in front of me are open. And when you don't have to worry about time, or when you don't have to dedicate just your precious weekends and evenings to whatever project you pick on, when essentially you have 168 hours per week to do whatever you're passionate about, that gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility. And so I don't know what Grigori is going to be doing, the future Grigori in 2031 is going to be doing. It's like those old comic books like Spider-Man 2099. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty awesome and entertaining.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I'm going to push hard on the retirement thing, because what you're describing is not really retirement to me. It is leaving the rat race. But as you talk about, I might start a personal finance blog, I got some books I want to write. Unless you're the volunteering you did say, but unless you're planning on just putting these things out in the universe for free, as people describe retirement, as every billboard that I drive on the Garden State Parkway yells at you, put your money away now so you never have to look at it and pay any attention to it, and you just live off this, these dividends, this expected returns. But it doesn't even suggest actively managing it when you're in the retirement range. Now, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know if I ever will be. I don't really think I want to be, but that's a whole other thing. But what you're talking about, we've talked about hacking Warren Buffett's strategy and everything. You're not stopping doing that, right? I assume, right? You're still paying attention. You're still investing. You're still, so I don't know. I'm pushing back on the notion, even as retirement, it's an interesting life. And as you say, who knows what it's going to be like in 10 years, but, yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Well, it's I have a very finance-oriented mind, so in a way, I'm perfectly Americanized because I can't look at a hobby without thinking, how can I monetize it? And so, for example, I'm learning how to play kalimba, which is an awesome instrument, Kalimba. It's an
Yeah.
awesome instrument because you don't need to tune it. You just hit it with a hammer every now and then. It's perfect, unlike, say, a guitar. And so I already have this plan for becoming like a street musician with a little amplifier and, just screwing with my kalimba for, like $1 an hour or whatever. And for writing a book, it's more of just a check mark on a bucket list, because I have a few ebooks on Kindle and stuff like that, self-published, really sad. But actually getting a deal with an actual publisher to actually publish a book that's going to be on actual bookshelves, that's an entirely different thing. Or finally reading that stack of books about the art of writing and writing several science fiction short stories that will actually get published. So, another check mark. And or starting a blog that, for example, is going to become like in a top 20% most popular, blah, blah, blah. And I think in a way, every person who has hobbies on some subconscious level, they have some goals. For example, there are joggers and runners who train to, run the marathon and then run the marathon in X number of hours. Totally not for me. Have flat feet, not a good idea. But I think deep inside, most people, not everybody, like if you were growing petunias, I don't know what that would look like. But I think deep inside, everybody who has a hobby has some pie in the sky dream. Like, oh, hey, I'm playing this guitar. Maybe someday I'm gonna be a backup act for Bruce Springsteen, whatever. I don't know. But essentially, I just view the world differently than most people in terms of actual victory condition for a hobby, and what I would need to do to level up. So think video games, Skyrim. And and retirement as a concept itself is a relatively new invention, because until the advent of Social Security in the 1930s, it used to be just have a bunch of children and then try to live long enough to see your grandkids. And so for the 99.9% of human history, retirement was not even a concept. It was just that, oh, wow, you made it past 50, tell us your secrets, or great wise one. And the early retirement and the FIRE movement and such, the history is kind of sketchy, but everybody agrees it first appeared on a radar about 40 years ago. And it only became a big concept because of internet, because of Reddit, because of people like Tim Ferriss. And so essentially, I'm not saying I'm a groundbreaking, just like pioneer and explorer, but it amuses me to think that hypothetically all of my hundreds of thousands of ancestors are looking down and going like, holy cow, you actually did that.
No, I think it's interesting. My only and maybe it's just my own background, right? Because I had some government experience, and I worked in some companies, and there are a lot of people that are trying to put in, maybe it's not 30 years and you retire on the day and you get your defined benefit pension anymore, but it's very much a culture of the kids are grown eventually, we'll be able to cash in that 401k and, like I say, move down to God's waiting room in Florida, it's just the word. The only problem I have is the word, man. I don't like retired anything. I like moved on to the next adventure, which is, I don't know. And I might be articulating a debate that people have had 100 times and I just wasn't paying attention, but actually, there is a question. What do you do for health insurance? Quebec's an interesting case, right? You can't just show up in Quebec and say, hey, I'm here, and get your insurance card, or can you?
You actually can. Quebec is one of the several reasons I moved to Quebec from Toronto is because outside Quebec, most of Canada is almost like the United States. It's kind of like an estranged sibling, except instead of guns, they have maple syrup everywhere, and it's hilarious. But Quebec actually feels like a foreign country, and it's an alternate reality kind of thing where if France defeated England, then that's what everything would have looked like. And so it actually feels like a foreign country. It's really cool. It satisfies my wanderlust and my urge to travel the world. But so Quebec has rent control. So like I said, this beautiful one-bedroom apartment here in the heart of Quebec City, 500 USD a month with all the utilities and fast internet. Amazing. All of Canada has this healthcare plan where basically you get your health card, and your high taxes are going to make sure that like if you get cancer or diabetes, you will not die. You don't have to declare bankruptcy. There's a lot of caveats. But also in all of Canada outside Quebec, you have to pay for your own medication and your own dental care, because apparently your teeth are not part of your body, which is a weird concept. So in Quebec, it's slightly different. They have this separate program where taxes in Quebec are higher than anywhere in Canada. The sales tax is 15%. Everything else is roughly the same. But in exchange for that, there's a province-wide plan where your medications are covered. And so essentially, if you need your medication anywhere outside Quebec, and if you live in, I don't know, Manitoba, Ontario, British Columbia, and stuff like that, then it's coming out of your pocket. If you need your medication in Quebec, again, it's not for everybody. There's caveats and exclusions, but essentially, you got that covered. And of course, I speak from place of privilege because I'm healthy as a horse from, just like sturdy Siberian genetic stock. But I know enough, I'm not so arrogant as to think I'm going to stay bulletproof forever. And so planning for the next 30, 40, 50 years, if I get some kind of a hiccup with my health, then Canada, and especially Quebec, will help me take care of it.
Got it. Hey, Grigory, I want to leave the folks wanting more. I could ask you questions all day here, and maybe if this weren't being broadcast, I'd keep you on here. It's an interesting thing when I interview people consciously with an audience. You're always tracking. You're always like, let me interrupt a bit. But when I do it independently, I mean, man, I just try and keep quiet, because people will go on and you'll get the most interesting stuff sometimes. But this has been great. I really appreciate it today. I wish you luck. I'll pop in and visit next time I'm in Quebec City. It's every 15 years or so I might be waiting a little bit. But but no, seriously, congratulations for living your life on your terms and taking this step. And I'll be in touch with you about what we're gonna do with this in terms of writing an article. So thank you very much today. I appreciate it.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Cheers.
And thank you everybody for tuning in. If I think right above my head, if I've done this correctly, it should say understandably.com, and that's where you should go and sign up if you have not done so already. Nothing like relentless promotion. I got to learn to do that more though. So, okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Cheers.